Hi everyone and welcome to Canada Top to Bottom. Now, if you're thinking about moving to Canada and perhaps feeling overwhelmed by the massive amount of information available and the seemingly endless options for how to immigrate, don't worry, we've got you covered.
We did the move ourselves from the UK and now live in Canada and can honestly say we would never look back. This country really does live up to all the expectations and deserves all the hype.
There are a huge amount of options for ways to move to Canada permanently. I think there are over 70, and you will probably be eligible for more than one program. So the difficulty is deciding which one to choose. Today's video is aimed at those looking to immigrate, but who perhaps have a low CRS score, meaning that you might not be able to gain many points for your education or work experience or skill set.
Plus, despite the name, the express entry route can still take an awfully long time, especially if you have to retrain or gain extra work experience or qualifications. But never fear, there is a route to permanent residence in Canada for people who don't have the points required to get selected in the express entry pool.
The program we're talking about is called the Atlantic Immigration Pilot Program, or the AIPP, which was started as a pilot in 2017 with the aim of filling the labour shortages in Canada's eastern provinces. In essence, the program helps connect eligible foreign workers with employers who haven't been able to fill their positions with local workers. The Atlantic provinces are Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, New Brunswick, and Newfoundland and Labrador. The program was so popular and so successful that it's now being turned into a permanent program.
So there are a lot of great things about the AIPP. Firstly, it is a direct route to permanent residence in Canada, and it is not based on the point system that Express Entry is. It is a standalone program. Great for you if you're worried that your CRS score is too low. Secondly, the program does not require high levels of English or French. In fact, the minimum requirements are as low as CLB4, which is considerably lower than any other programs. So you definitely don't need to be fluent in French or English, far from it. You just need to be able to communicate.
Thirdly, you can be eligible for this program with as little as a high school education. You don't need a university degree and you don't gain anything by having higher qualifications. And finally, the proof of funds is very low, with you needing to show you have as little as $3,300 for a single person and just over $4,000 for a couple.
Immigration through the AIPP is not just a work permit. The aim is to enable foreign workers to come to Canada permanently. Once you're accepted for the program and you receive your job offer, you will get your work permit and your application for permanent residence will also be underway. And not just for you, but for your whole family. In order to participate in the program, you must have received a job offer, but this is perfectly possible from inside or outside of Canada.
So, there are three possibilities to be eligible for the Atlantic Immigration Pilot Program, and you must meet the requirements of one of them to be eligible for the program. The first possibility is the Atlantic International Graduate Program. This is for people who have studied in and recently graduated from one of the Atlantic provinces. There are four main criteria for the program. Firstly, applicants must have a credential from an academic institution in one of the four Atlantic provinces. Any academic credentials from outside Canada do not count and will not be considered under this stream.
Secondly, you must have lived in one of the Atlantic provinces for at least 16 months in the last 2 years before getting your degree, your diploma, or your credential. Thirdly, you have to prove that you can speak some English or French, and you need to take an official test to show this. And finally, you need to provide proof of funds showing that you will be able to support yourself and any family members financially when you arrive in Canada.
The great news for the Atlantic International Graduate Program is that there is no work experience requirement at all. If you have lived and studied in one of the provinces, can communicate in English or French, and have enough money to support yourself, then you will be eligible for the program.
Now, of course, you may be thinking that this is all well and good for people who have studied in Canada. But what about people who have no Canadian study experience? Well, don't worry. There are two other options for those without any Canadian experience. In fact, you don't even need to have ever set foot in Canada. The first option is called the Atlantic High Skilled Program. This stream does have a work experience requirement and is for applicants who have worked in a management, a professional, or a technical or skilled job for at least 12 months in the 3 years prior to applying.
It would also be useful to point out here that work experience while self-employed doesn't count towards the total. It must have been paid work through an employer. With regards to education, for this stream you only need to have a minimum of a high school diploma or certificate. If you have qualifications which are higher than this, that's great. This is just the minimum requirement. And it's no problem if your qualification is from a country other than Canada. All you need to do is get your academic credential assessed just to show that it is valid and equal to a Canadian credential.
Finally, there is also a language and a proof of funds requirement for this stream, as with the international graduate stream. To be eligible, you must take a language test to show that you are able to communicate in English or in French, and you need to prove that you have enough money to support yourself and any family members once you've arrived in Canada. The final stream within the AIPP is the Atlantic Intermediate Skilled Programme. This is very similar to the Atlantic High Skilled Programme, but the work experience requirement is slightly different with this stream. You must have at least 1 year's work experience working in a role which requires a high school education and/or job-specific training. So for example, a butcher, a long-haul truck driver, or a food server. As with the high skilled programme, you only need to have a minimum of a high school diploma or certificate from either in or outside of Canada. If it's from a country outside of Canada, you will need to have it assessed to show that it is equal to a Canadian credential. And, as with all streams within the AIPP, you'll need to prove your language ability in English or French and also provide proof of funds.
With regards to languages, the only official English language tests which are accepted in the programme are the AIPP General Test or the IELTS General Training Test. And for French language, only the TCF Canada or the TEF Canada are accepted. Nothing else will be considered. The links to all those things are in the description below.
But don't worry at all if these mean nothing to you. Just bear in mind, if you're planning to immigrate to Canada, you will almost certainly have to take a language test. So it's worth knowing that it can be in French or English, and these are the only ones you should consider. Take a look at our video all about language tests for a lot more in-depth information and full explanations.
So, to summarise, the Atlantic Immigration Pilot Programme is open for people who wish to immigrate to Canada and live in one of the 4 Atlantic provinces: Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, New Brunswick and Newfoundland and Labrador. There are 3 possibilities for immigrating to Canada via the AIPP: as an international graduate, a highly skilled worker, or an intermediate skilled worker.
For all 3 streams, you have to prove your language proficiency in English or French, and you must be able to show proof of sufficient funds. The graduate programme requires an academic credential from an institution in one of the relevant Atlantic provinces, whereas the highly skilled worker and the intermediate skilled programmes only require a high school certificate. And finally, the graduate programme has no work experience requirement whatsoever, whereas the other 2 streams require at least 1 year of relevant work experience, the nature of which depends on whether you're applying as a high or an intermediate skilled worker.
So for all these programmes, once you have proved that you are eligible by meeting all the criteria, you can then receive your job offer. In order to qualify, the job must be full-time, which must be 30 paid hours per week, and the contract must be for at least 1 year. It must also be from a designated employer who is part of the AIPP in the Atlantic province where you plan to move.
More great news for this programme is that it's much easier for a Canadian employer to hire a foreign worker through the AIPP. This is because normally an employer has to apply for an LMIA, essentially proving that they couldn't find a Canadian worker to do the job. But this is not necessary for the AIPP, which makes the whole process so much simpler.
The Atlantic Immigration Pilot Programme is currently the easiest way to move to Canada permanently, provided you meet the minimum requirements and are happy to live in one of Canada's Atlantic provinces. It is not based on the point system, so if you've calculated your CRS points total and do not have enough to get selected for express entry, don't give up. There are other options for moving to Canada, so stay tuned and make sure you hit subscribe to our channel for a lot more information on how to move here.